Fear Zone, your channel for real haunted tales. Good evening, everyone, and today's story is about Mr. Vicente, and it happened to him in the city of Pocos de Jundiaí, which is in Brazil, and at that time it was the year 2001. Mr. Vicente was 25 years old. And today I'm going to tell you about the danger I went through at dawn, where a creature attacked me, but the werewolf was surprised. But before I start this horror story, leave your like and subscribe to our channel to receive more videos every week. Now let's get to today's story. And it all started like this. At the time, I worked as a helper on a farm in the region, which was in a rural neighborhood of my city, but I only worked there during the day, and in the afternoon, I would go back to my house, which was in a nearby village. But what happened one day was that I was helping the caretaker to do a renovation around the farm until the evening, and after we finished the maintenance around the property, which was around 9:30 at night, the caretaker, who lived on the farm, told me that I could borrow a horse so that I could get home more quickly. I agreed at the time, and then I got the horse ready, got on it, and set off on my way home. As soon as I arrived at a dirt road ahead, and I walked with the animal to that road, I changed direction, went to a bar, bought a few cans of beer to drink at home, and after I did that, I got on my horse again and took another dirt road that cut the way to my village. However, we were already in the middle of a road, but the light from the street lamps was brightening up the dirt road a bit, and it suddenly happened that the horse I was riding started to get nervous, and he neighed a lot, and didn't want to go any further because that road, I didn't understand why my horse was doing that, because I looked straight ahead, and I didn't see anything that could scare him. But what happened next was that, with a lot of difficulty, the animal was walking slowly along the road, and until out of nowhere, a black figure came out of the middle of the vegetation, and it advanced on the horse, and at that moment I was very frightened. I was surprised by something I hadn't expected. I was amazed when I looked closely at what it was that had attacked us, because it was a creature that looked like a large, bizarre dog, and it clung to my horse's neck, and attacked it very violently, trying to bite it. But then the horse began to jump several times, until it managed to escape from that beast. With that, the creature fell lying on the ground, and I held on to the horse and managed to balance myself on top of the cell. I was very frightened, but this beast from the road got up on all fours and stood in front of us, and then he tried to circle us to catch us from behind, but the horse followed him. I was frightened at that moment, and to me it looked like a dog from hell, this creature, because its eyes were lit up and macabre. Well, as the beast was threatening to attack us, and my horse wouldn't run, I grabbed my whip and started trying to lash out at this animal, but the bizarre beast got angry, and he stood up to attack my horse. But then, I realized that this was a werewolf, and he growled with rage at every lash I tried to hit him with, and his appearance was to terrify any man. Finally, from the noises the whip made, the werewolf got scared and moved away from me, and it was a monkey-like creature, but it had a muzzle like a dog's, and big, pointed ears. Anyway, this ferocious monster kept staring at me, and I saw that the situation was getting very dangerous, so I continued to whip it more. This beast, even though he was balancing on two legs, he kept moving further and further back, so I saw the opportunity to escape from this monster, so I took advantage of this moment, and made my horse start running, and my horse obeyed me and took off running down the street. But to my amazement, even so, that strange creature from the road got on all fours again, and continued to chase us, running after us. And this beast leapt up and grabbed the back of my horse, and then, to my surprise, my horse began to kick this creature violently, and this werewolf couldn't take the blows, and ended up letting go of my horse, so we managed to get away from this monster once and for all. And when I looked back, I saw that this monster had fallen to the ground and was trying to get up and was growling angrily at me. And that's when my horse was running away from that place, and when I looked back again, it stood up like a man, like on two legs, and it was still standing in the middle of the road watching me run away, and that being was a werewolf for sure. After that moment of danger that I went through, I left for my village. Soon afterwards, I arrived at my house really terrified, and I didn't even sleep properly because I kept thinking about the werewolf and how lucky I was to have a horse helping me on the road at that moment when the creature attacked us, and if I had been walking on that dirt road, I would have been in a lot of danger. But the problem is that this creature appeared a few blocks away from my neighborhood, and this animal could still be around. However, the hours went by, but when it was around 4 o'clock in the morning, I was still awake, and I saw the siren lights of police cars in front of my house. I looked out of the window to see what was going on, and what I saw was that the guards were looking in a vacant lot in front of my house, but after these policemen shone their flashlights through the vegetation, they didn't see anything. And then the policemen turned on the car and left the place. Well, I don't know if these policemen were after a bandit or the werewolf, and it was too much of a coincidence that these officers showed up in my neighborhood on the day the creature attacked me. But apart from that, the day soon dawned and I got on my horse and went to work at the farm. Arriving at my place of work, I talked to the caretaker about the werewolf because he kept asking about the bruises left on the horse. The foreman was a bit shaky as to whether he believed me or not, and as he lived on that isolated farm, he felt scared when I told him this story. So, on the other days, I even watched to see if I came across any different people in my neighborhood, or a man with some kind of wound or injury, because for me, what I know is that someone turns into this beast, and since I saw and was attacked by such a creature, I became suspicious that this werewolf might appear again. However, several months passed, and to this day, I haven't heard another story of this creature appearing in the region, and perhaps on that day, when I was attacked by the werewolf, it will also be known if the police officers who were chasing this creature earlier in the morning, and perhaps this man who turned into a werewolf realized that he was being sought by the police, and that's why he left town. But apart from this mystery, I remember this creature attacking me on the road, and to this day I've been traumatized by it, and I don't walk through these woods or dirt roads in the early hours of the morning, because it could happen that the creature appears by surprise and attacks me again. And one of the things that surprised me is that the horse knows when supernatural evil is around, because the horse sensed that something was going to happen on that road and tried to warn me, and that horse certainly saved my life. And that was my true tale of terror. Thanks for watching the video, and if you liked the story, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time. The Fear Zone, your channel of haunted stories. Today's story, who sent us this story was Mr. Fernando, and this happened to him in the year 2003, when he was only 19 years old, and lived in the city of Serra Talhada, which is in Brazil. And today I will tell you about my experience that I had with a werewolf, and I discovered that these creatures are treacherous and vengeful. And to start the story, I live in a neighborhood in the city, but a few years ago, I went to spend my vacation at my uncle's house, which was in a rural village, where it was a region with many forests, and also was a very nice place, because there, I hunted with my 2 cousins who were young like me, and we went swimming in a pond. And in this pond was another type of fun very different from the city. After days at my uncle's house, my cousin and I went to a small farm to see one of his neighbors who had had a fight at a party in a nearby neighborhood. And this neighbor said that he beat up a strange guy at the party a few days ago, but this friend of my cousin said something strange, that a few days ago, he was coming back to his house at night, and he saw a big and strange dog, and this animal followed him near his house, and then this neighbor noticed that the creature was running around the fence of his yard, and this guy said it was a werewolf, because this creature walked upright and then walked like an animal on four legs, but his dogs would not let this creature into his yard, and my neighbor said he had no firearm in his place to defend himself from this creature, but then when it got close to 4 o'clock in the morning, the werewolf left. Well, for me, I was amazed at this werewolf report, because I had never heard anything like this before, and from a report that just happened, because I had only heard stories of werewolves that had already occurred many years ago. But the fact is that I was in doubt if this horror story was true. After a while at this man's house, we left and went back to our house. After a few days, my cousin and I learned that the guy who fought with my neighbor was hanging around my neighborhood at night, and we ended up seeing this guy around our village. However, at a certain early morning, I woke up with many barking dogs in the neighborhood, but suddenly, amid all that noise, I ended up hearing a woman screaming, and she screamed as if she needed help fast. I was very concerned about the woman, and then decided to wake my cousin so we could see what was happening, but soon this woman ended up screaming again. My cousin, who was a very brave guy, grabbed his hunting rifle. We realized that those cries were coming from the house of our neighbor friend. So we went to the street quickly, and when we arrived at the neighbor's house, we saw something strange, for there was a huge creature attacking her horse. Then, my cousin shot his rifle up to scare the creature, and the beast stopped attacking the horse, but it happened that this animal was standing on only 2 legs, and that to me was a werewolf. I will never forget that image that I saw that day, because this beast was almost 2 meters tall, and his body had black fur all over his body, and his eyes were very yellow like lights, and he looked at us with anger, and this creature was standing like a man. My cousin even scared he was aiming the rifle again at the werewolf, but the creature ducked and started running on 4 legs. My cousin shot the werewolf again, but missed, but the beast ran to the back of the house. We were afraid too. At that time, me and my cousin, who was armed, ran away, and arriving home, I asked my cousin why he did not shoot more times at the creature, and he told me that he only had 2 more shots in the rifle, but missed the shots at the werewolf. At that time, my uncle woke up, and we told him what had happened, so he got his rifle and more ammunition, and we went back to that lady's house, but when we got there, we couldn't find that werewolf anymore, and in order not to fool around in that house and end up bumping into that creature again, we took the neighbor and her son to our house that day. My neighbor was very afraid of that werewolf because it was the second time that the werewolf attacked his house, and he didn't know why the creature wanted to attack his family. Well, we did not sleep well. We were kind of in shock because that animal could still be around, but good, that creature did not appear more that day, because my uncle would hurt him with the bullets from his gun. But when dawn came, my cousin and I decided to take a walk around the village to see if we found any clue to the werewolf, but we found nothing, and then the next day, we decided to look for more clues of this creature. We entered another forest that was further away from the village, and it was almost 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and that's when we found that guy who had fought with our neighbor at the party, and he was alone in the bushes, and this man, when he saw us, he ran out and disappeared into the woods, and strangely this guy was burying some bones on the ground, which seemed to be the remains of some butcher shop. Well, we thought that this stranger was doing something wrong around here. The fact is, I started to relate that he had something to do with this werewolf, because this creature attacked our neighbor's house twice, and my neighbor fought with this man at the party, and this stranger, we caught him burying these bones in the ground. After all this, we returned home, and as the days passed, the strange guy, we saw no more, and not a new report of this werewolf in the area. But my vacation was over, and I went back to my house in the city, and after about 4 months, I ended up going back to my cousin's house, and asked about the beast, and the strange guy that we suspected to be the werewolf. My cousin told me that this guy that was in the woods that day disappeared from the village, and nobody knows where he went. But for sure, he was the one that turned into the werewolf, and tried to get revenge on our neighbor, who beat him at the party, and the suspect, knowing that there were already people wanting to hunt the werewolf, this man left. And that was my story. If you like this horror story, like it and subscribe to the channel. Until the next story. Channel Fear Zone, your channel of horror stories. And we go to today's story, which is from Mr. Peter, and it happened to him in the city of Casanova, which is in the state of Bahia, and was in the year 2010, when he was 35 years old. And to begin my story, the region that I lived, at that time of my city, was kind of a village with many simple houses, and the neighborhood was still surrounded by dirt roads. But otherwise, one night I was watching television normally in my house, and soon after I went to the door and went out of my residence, I stood there in front of the area of my house smoking a cigarette and looking at the darkness of the woods that had near the house. But suddenly, a man appeared walking through the streets of my neighborhood, and this guy seemed a little lost, and as soon as this man saw me sitting there in front of my house, he ended up asking me if there were other neighborhoods near mine. I answered him that my village was the last neighborhood in the region, and further ahead only had closed forests. This stranger then said thank you, and went in the direction of the closed woods, and then turned one street ahead and disappeared. But I didn't pay him any mind, and with that, I continued in front of my house looking at the night landscape. But it happens that after it was around 1 o'clock in the morning, I saw something in the woods next to the neighbor's house that lived across the street, and looking well, I got a fright, because it seemed to be a large animal, and it was similar to a dog, and even dark there in that vacant lot, and full of tall woods. You could see the eyes of that animal, which seemed to be 2 lights on. I was perplexed and curious about this strange creature. I wanted to know what it was, because I didn't know if it was a dog. This animal leaned against the wooden fence of the front neighbor's house, and suddenly, this strange creature stood up like a man, that at that very hour, in my understanding that was a werewolf, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and this creature was kind of breaking the fence's wood, and for sure, wanted to get inside that house, but it was that the reaction of the neighbor's dog arrived there next to the fence, and started barking at the werewolf, and the werewolf got out of there, and went to hide in the underbrush. But at that time I went into my house, and without making any sudden movements so that the werewolf wouldn't notice me, I went straight for my rifle. I closed my house, and I kept looking out the window toward the underbrush to see what the werewolf was going to do. I was prepared with my rifle, because if this creature decided to come towards my house, I would shoot it with my gun, but also, I wouldn't risk shooting that creature, because it was too far away. And I also wouldn't know what reaction that werewolf would have, and so I gave up shooting that creature at that time. But while I was there amazed with what I was seeing, suddenly passed a couple walking down the street, and they were talking loudly, and seemed to be coming from some party. Then I got scared for that couple, because that creature, hearing the voice of the couple that was walking down the street, that creature quickly got on 4 legs, and went to near the street of the vacant lot, but when the couple passed in front of the creature that was hidden in the woods, I realized that the werewolf was standing and already in position to attack, and I did not wait and shot in the direction of this creature. I do not know if I hit the creature, but that werewolf fell to the ground and began to roll on the ground. But this beast got up quickly, and he left running and entered the woods and disappeared, and the couple, scared without knowing what had happened, left running in fear with the shots I gave, and I even think that the couple did not see the werewolf hidden because it was very dark on the street. But after the noise of the shot, the dogs in the village started barking nonstop, and the neighbors woke up too, and some came to my door to know what had happened, but I didn't tell them the truth. I just said that there was a jaguar prowling around the village, and that it was going to attack 2 people, and so I shot this animal with my rifle. And with that, 2 of my neighbors came with their rifles and called me to go after the jaguar. I ended up going with them because I couldn't let that creature loose, because that werewolf could kill anyone who might be walking at dawn on the street in our neighborhood, and so I started walking with my neighbors through the woods near my village. But time went by, and nothing and no sign of the beast, but when it was almost 5 o'clock in the morning, then we decided to return to our homes, and that's when something strange happened, because that man who appeared at night in front of my house, and who was asking me if there was another neighborhood, he appeared out of nowhere and came to us while we were returning to the village, and he saw us with guns in our hands, and he asked me what we were hunting, and I told him that it was a big jaguar that we saw roaming around the neighborhood, and he got a little embarrassed and started to leave by himself. But I asked this man if he wasn't afraid to leave at that moment, and this guy didn't even answer, and he left just like that, and I thought to myself, I wouldn't have the courage to leave at that time through those roads, even if I knew of the dangerous animal out there. After all this, I ended up going back to my house. I kept thinking about this werewolf, because I really saw this creature standing. I kept thinking about this event in my life, and soon came to a conclusion, because what people tell about this beast is that they say that it is a man who turns into a werewolf, and putting the facts together, I came to the conclusion that the man who appeared in front of my house is, for me, the suspect of turning this monster. And yet, the suspect appeared in the morning at hunting time, and left without any fear of the jaguar that we were hunting, and this secret that I invented, that the creature that I saw was a jaguar, I did not deny, because then no one would believe me if I said that it was a werewolf that appeared, and so I could not mobilize my neighbors to hunt this creature, and as I said it was a jaguar, the people were already smarter, and in this case, it was worth keeping this secret. And as time went by, I still kept looking at the strange people who walked through my village to see if I would meet that strange guy again, because to me, he was the first suspect of being this werewolf, or it could be someone else too, that maybe I will never know, and that was my story and experience that I had with a real werewolf. Thank you all who watched my horror video. And if you liked the story, leave your like and hit the notification bell to help our channel grow, and for the channel to make more videos, subscribe. Canal Zona do Medo. Here you will find the best werewolf stories. And now, let's go to the story of today, which is Mr. Felix, and this happened to him in the city of Paulo Afonso, which is in Brazil, and at that time, which was in the year 2009, Mr. Felix was 35 years old. And it all starts like this. I live in an ordinary neighborhood of my city, with my wife and 2 more children, but the residents of my village, almost all, have chicken and goat farms, and even horses, in their houses. However, I do not raise animals, but I do have a car, and I work in a supermarket, making deliveries during the day to the houses in the nearby neighborhoods. And to start my horror story was for a certain night, when I was resting at home, and it was around midnight, and one of my neighbors came calling me at home for me to do something for him, and so I attended this friend in front of my house, and we started talking. Then my friend said that his goat was dead in his backyard, and that his animal died today because of a certain strange disease that this animal had. Well, I went to this man's house to see what I could do, and I was called by him because I had a car with a bucket, and I would take this dead goat in my car to throw the corpse of the goat in some distant bush, and so I agreed to do this for this neighbor, and he would give me some money, and after everything was settled, we put this dead animal in the bucket of my car, which was even wrapped in some kind of blanket because of his disease. Then I started the car, and we began to drive around the dirt roads so that we could dump this animal somewhere far away. However, after passing through several dark roads that night, we arrived at a very remote place, which was a place outside the city with many woods around. I stopped the car right there. Then my neighbor and I picked up the dead goat and started carrying it into the middle of the woods. After walking about 30 meters through the vegetation, we left the animal's body on the ground of the vacant lot, and just at that moment, I felt the urge to pee, and started to pee right there. Meanwhile, my neighbor went back to my car, and after I finished this need, I was already going back to my car to leave this place, and it was at this time that I saw a strange creature walking through the woods. Close to where I was, I got scared to see if the beast, because of the size of it, and it was bigger than a dog, and sensing the danger, I thought about running towards my car, but what happened is that when I looked towards my car, I saw another of these creatures close to my car. And this animal was sniffing the smell of the goat. With this, I crouched in the bush and stood looking at these 2 strange beasts. But something terrible was in the air, because, besides not knowing what kind of beasts were those beings, what was more strange, because they had a light on in their eyes, which was a very amazing and scary thing to see. I don't know how these monsters didn't see me at that moment. I kept hiding in the bushes, then I kept looking at these beasts to see what they were going to do. Of course, I was very afraid, because I was going through that danger and waiting for the right moment so I could run towards my car. So I looked at the car, but I didn't see my neighbor, but for sure he must be hiding inside the car or even in another place. Then those 2 animals started sniffing the air, and then they walked through the bushes and walked towards the dead goat, and those animals got close to the carcass of the goat. But then something happened, because those creatures started fighting for the goat, but to my surprise, one of those creatures stood up and stood like a man, and I was impressed with this ability of this animal to stand up, and at the time, I thought that this, for sure, was a werewolf. However, I was still in danger, but the 2 werewolves stopped fighting and started eating the flesh of the dead animal. However, my friend opened the car window and started calling me, making gestures with his hands, and I took advantage and ran to the vehicle and managed to get in the car, so I started the car quickly, but when I looked at the bushes, I saw the 2 werewolves running towards me at high speed to attack us. I managed to get out quickly with the car, but these beasts hit the car's body, but even so, I managed to get out of that street quickly with my vehicle, and we saved ourselves. My neighbor and I were very scared, and we talked a lot, and came to the conclusion that those two animals were really werewolves. And after all this danger, we arrived at our homes, and we were still amazed. How is it possible that those things exist? Well, at least my neighborhood was a place with many residences, and hardly those werewolves appear in inhabited places. That dawn, I went to sleep, but when dawn came, I kept remembering the images of werewolves and all the dangers that I spent in that bush with these creatures, and I was even thinking to return to that place in the afternoon. But I was too scared to do that, and I let it go. But after 3 days of seeing the two werewolves, me and my neighbor went back to the place where we had left the goat's body. And at that point, when we were already driving by car, we started to look at the goat's carcass, but after a while, we saw two old men leaving a farm, and then they were walking around the place and came towards us, and I started talking to these gentlemen and asked these old men if they had seen any strange creatures in the area, and they told me that the only thing they saw was 3 days ago when these two old men were passing by these roads around 6 o'clock in the morning, and the old men said that they saw two men very ill on a dirt road, these two strange guys vomiting a lot, and it was so serious that even the ambulance came to rescue them. In this, I told my werewolf story to these gentlemen, in which I saw during the early morning hours these two old men who were also brothers. They were amazed with my story. I told the two brothers to warn the other residents of the area about the two creatures and the risks of walking at night near these woods. I noticed that one of the brothers had some bruises and scratches on his arm, and as my neighbor and I found no sign of these two creatures, we decided to return to our homes. But of course, we were also concerned because there were two werewolves that were walking near the area, and those creatures together were extremely dangerous. The fact is that after a few days, I still have many doubts from this account until today, when I saw these two werewolves and the appearance of those two men vomiting on the road just as day dawned, because this happened the same night that we passed the danger with those beasts, and I thought so that the werewolves ate the carcass of the goat, which died of disease and ended up passing away. But also, my neighbor said that he had been to the old brother's farm, and a local inhabitant of that region said that those two men only appeared 2 or 3 times a year on the farm, and then they would leave and appear months later, and my neighbor began to suspect that the old men could be the two werewolves that attacked us at dawn, because one of them had wounds, as if he had been attacked by an animal with claws. Well, years have passed, and I haven't heard anything more about these creatures in the region, but even today, I keep an eye on these woods, and I take care and avoid walking near these places at night, because I don't want to be caught by surprise and fall victim to these werewolves. Anyway, what do you think? Were those two men that the two old men on the road told us that they saw them getting sick were the werewolves, or were those old men the werewolves and tricked us? That's the question. And that was my horror story. And before we go to the next werewolf story, please like it and also subscribe to the channel. Fear Zone Channel, your channel of real horror stories. And today's story is The Salt Shot Weakened the Werewolf. Good evening, everyone, and now we go to today's story, which is from Mr. Alexander, and this happened to him in the city of Pato Branco, which is in Brazil, and at that time, which was in the year 1988, Mr. Alexander was still a teenager. And to begin with, I'll tell you what happened to me in a certain dawn, and I did something against the werewolf that I didn't expect to happen to the creature. And it all starts like this. At that time I was still very young, and lived with my parents and siblings on a farm owned by our family. Other than that, I had a shotgun that I used to hunt animals in the woods, and hunting was a normal thing for me. With all that, one day, I was walking through the woods in my region, together with a friend, and we were hunting birds, and after walking a lot through the vegetation, we saw near a dirt track, a new and clean shirt on the ground, and also had a good pair of pants, and a pair of shoes, and these clothes lying around. My friend said that it could be some witchcraft work that they did on these clothes, and to not risk being bewitched. We left the clothes behind, and continued walking until near a very closed forest. Well, but just ahead, we saw a farmer who was the caretaker of a farm, and this man was digging a hole in the ground with a hoe, so my friend and I went there to see what was happening, and when I got close to him, I saw his dog lying dead on the ground, and the hole was for burying his animal. This bumpkin's name was Mr. Beto, and he told me that the one who killed his dog was some supposed animal that entered the farm at dawn and fought with his dog, and to make matters worse, the caretaker also said that his new helper who lives on the farm was also attacked by this beast at dawn, because with the noises of the dogs fighting with some beast on the farm, his helper woke up, and when he went outside in the yard, a huge animal appeared and attacked him by surprise at dawn and left him with several deep bite marks, but the helper managed to run and escape from the invading creature. But the caretaker said that he didn't see anything during the dawn. He found this story very strange. After this whole story, the farmer's helper showed up to see the burial of the dog, and I actually saw that he had several bite marks on his arm, and even on his face. He also had some small injuries, and this guy said that it was a huge black dog, and that this animal was out of control, and this beast attacked him. And this guy warned us to be careful, not to be attacked by this creature, because the animal could be somewhere hidden in the woods. But this helper also said that if we find such a creature, it was to leave it alive. Well, as soon as my friend's dog was buried, and we ended up leaving, we were afraid to hunt birds that day through the woods, because we didn't want to run the risk of finding this mad dog in the middle of the vegetation. With this, we walked a lot and arrived in our neighborhood, and my friend went to his house. I ended up arriving at my farm, and by my luck I did not see this creature. The fact is, that passed a few days after this case of the animal attack on the farm, and I went into town by car with my father to buy food and feed for the chickens of the farm. However, as soon as we returned by car, and when I arrived in my village, I saw such a farm helper that was attacked by the beast, and he was walking on the road. I told my father to stop the car, and he did. I talked a little with this helper, and he told me that he was already healing from his injuries, and that such a violent animal no longer appeared on the farm. The point is that I noticed that this helper was wearing the shirt and sneakers that my friend and I found in the woods the other day. As soon as we finished this conversation, I left with my father, and we got home, but I was thinking about the mystery of this man, to have picked up those clothes in the woods and wear them, because I had no doubt that it was the same clothes and sneakers that were thrown on the ground. However, the hours went by, and not long after it got dark, and when dawn came, I went to get my pack of cigarettes, which I forgot inside my father's car. I got the key to my father's car, and went to the backyard of the house, and opened the car door, and got inside the car, and found such a pack of cigarettes, and took it. But to my surprise, when I looked through the car window, I saw a huge animal behind the chicken coop, and he knew I was inside the car, because he had already noticed me. I was already smart, because this beast was looking in the direction of my car, but the strange thing is that this animal, at the same time, was hiding behind the chicken coop, and only appeared the part of his head behind the coop, and this animal was looking at me, as if he was watching me. He seemed very intelligent, hiding behind the chicken coop, and we could not see his body. But at this time, I wasn't too scared, because it was enough for me to go to my house and get my rifle, so I took a chance and opened the car door, and I looked at the animal that was hiding, which was about 15 meters away from me. I walked slowly towards my house, but this strange beast came running out from behind the chicken coop to attack me. I managed to run and entered my house, and managed to escape from that animal. I locked my door, and quickly, I went to my room and grabbed my shotgun, and as I had no more lead ammunition, I loaded my gun with salt. At that moment, I heard some footsteps of the animal near the house outside, so I slowly went to the window and saw the creature leaning against the wall facing me. It seemed to be waiting for me to leave the house or something. Anyway, I opened my window quietly, and with my gun loaded with salt, I shot this creature in the back. This beast gave a growling cry of pain. After that, this creature rolled on the ground, groaning in pain. While this beast rolled on the ground, I quickly reloaded my rifle again with salt, but at that instant, I saw that this creature, incredibly, this beast stood upright like a person, only on 2 legs, but on his back. There was a lot of smoke where he had taken the salt shot, and for me, it was for sure a werewolf, because his head was kind of like a man's head, but also, he looked like an animal, with big ears and a dog's snout, and his eyes were blood red, and his whole appearance was quite bizarre. The fact is, that this creature didn't know what to do, whether to attack me or run away. At that moment, my 2 dogs appeared and started barking at the werewolf, and this beast got distracted, and I took advantage and shot him again with salt on the chest of this creature, but this time he fell to the ground, and then he was getting up, but he stayed on 4 legs, and started running to escape through my yard. But the strange thing at this time is that the smoke on the back of this. At this instant, I closed the window of my room. I was very scared, but it didn't take long. My father and mother arrived in my room. I, even though astonished by this situation, told them what had happened, and warned them of the appearance of the werewolf, and also said that the werewolf could still be around, and that we were at great risk. My father took his rifle, and we stayed up that day, to protect ourselves from the werewolf. I don't know if he believed me or not, but I was scared all night until dawn, and at least the beast did not appear. But thinking about this werewolf, I found it strange. It was the salt shot doing all that smoke effect on the creature's back. Well, they say that salt helps ward off spiritual things, or supernatural evil. So, that might be what happened. The salt on the werewolf's back produced all that smoke. The point is that the day dawned, and because of what I experienced with this beast, I was very scared. But as some days passed, I thought that this werewolf could appear at any time of the night by surprise. This made me very afraid, because I thought that this creature could come back for revenge. But one day, my friend who hunted birds with me came by my house to call me, so I went hunting birds with him, and I told my friend that maybe the werewolf that attacked me could have killed the dog of the farm's caretaker. And while we were walking through the woods, we saw the same clothes that were lying on the ground the other day, but now they were in another place, and I was sure that they were the same clothes that the farm hand was wearing on the road when my father drove by, and I was talking to him. Well, we decided to go to the farm of the farmer, to know more thing if the creature returned there. Arriving at the farm, I talked with such a caretaker, and he told me that his helper suddenly asked the accounts 2 days ago, and left saying that he had to return to his city because his mother got sick. But the caretaker also said a revealing thing, that the helper was like strange marks on his neck, and his face was also bruised, and that it looked like wounds from salt shot. I was startled by this story, and to me, it was very clear that the injured helper was the werewolf. I also connected that from the clues, the bites he got that day was from the dog that did this to this helper, and he turned werewolf, killed the dog of the caretaker. As the days passed, I didn't see the suspicious helper around my neighborhood anymore, but to this day, I get scared to pass near the woods at night time because I know these creatures exist, and this was my horror story. Thanks for watching the video, and if you like it, leave your like and subscribe to the channel. Until the next video. Canal do Zona do Medo. Hi, good evening everyone, and now we go to the story of today, which is Mr. Ricardo, and it happened to him in the city of Araucaria, which is in the state of Parana, and at that time, which was in the year 2011, Mr. Ricardo was 33 years old. And it all starts like this. I live alone in the city center because of my work, but my mother and father still live on a farm in the region. But what happens is that sometimes I visit my family once a month, and it was on a certain weekend that everything changed for me because I arrived at my father's farm during the day, and I saw that he had reinforced the entrance to the chicken coop with some iron screens, and he told me that a week ago his dogs were barking too much at dawn. He was afraid. He grabbed his gun and looked out the window to see what was going on, and that's when my father saw a large figure of a strange animal coming out of his chicken coop, but he couldn't see what kind of beast it was because this animal was on its back. The fact is that this beast hid behind the chicken coop, and after a few minutes, this creature was already in the dark woods around our property, but my father also said that this animal was still looking at our house for a long time, and as it was just an animal, he opened the window, and this beast saw him with the rifle in his hands, and after that this being disappeared into the woods, and did not return this morning. My father found all this very strange, because this strange animal kept looking at us in a strange way, and he seemed to be very intelligent, but my father also said that the glow that this animal had in his eyes were so bright that it was amazing, and my father still doesn't understand how this beast managed to rip off a wooden door that was at the entrance of our chicken coop. Well, I grew up on this property, but had never heard of anything like this before, and as I didn't pay much attention to this story, after that I stayed there enjoying my farm all day, and spent the afternoon normally in my backyard, where I had many fruit trees. But what happened was that at night I was sleeping peacefully in my room, and it was already around 3 o'clock in the morning, when I heard one of my dogs crying and barking under my window, and then I heard some noises from the screens where the chickens were kept. At that moment, I got a little scared and looked out my window at my backyard, and I saw a huge animal inside the chicken coop attacking the chickens, and my dog was barking at a distance in fear of this animal, and what I did is that I got up and went to my backyard with the intention to arrest that beast right there inside the chicken coop. I walked slowly, without the beast seeing me, and when I got closer to the animal, I got a better look at this beast, and even though I didn't know what it was, this creature was huge and certainly very dangerous too, and could even kill a person. So I took advantage that this animal was distracted, and ran to the door of the chicken coop that was open and closed it, and held this wooden door with my hands. Then I saw that the lock of the chicken coop was broken, and could not hold this beast there, and that's when that animal saw me. I held it in there. This beast did not like, and began to growl angrily at me. And also I did not see very well this beast because there in the coop was very dark. While I held the door for the beast not to get out, I tried to lock the door with a wire. Soon after, I realized that this being began to move around a lot. I was scared because this beast, when I realized, this animal was already standing like a person, balancing on only 2 legs. I froze with fear to see this creature in front of me, and it was bizarre because it had the appearance of a kind of hairy monkey with a snout and ears like a wolf. Although this beast had a dark, matted coat, it had a strange gleam in its eyes, which were like lead lights, and to me, at that moment, it came to my mind that this beast was a werewolf. With all this creature came on top of me to try to attack me, but he hit the screen of the chicken coop, and this werewolf realized that he was trapped. Then the creature got desperate and started to pull the iron screen of the chicken coop with his claws with a lot of strength to try to get out of there from inside. At that moment of suffocation, when I was trying to hold the door so that the creature wouldn't get out, I started screaming for help because the werewolf was stronger than me, and as this beast would end up getting out of the chicken coop, then I took a risk, and I ended up letting go of this door that was already loose, and started running towards my house desperately. As my house was about 30 meters away, I got there quickly, and there was no time for the werewolf to chase me. And as soon as I passed the door, I locked it, and my father saw me all scared. I told him to get the shotgun quickly, and told him that a werewolf had appeared in our backyard. With all this trouble, we went to the window to look, and we saw our dog all agitated and barking everywhere, but the creature had already disappeared from the place. Anyway, even though I was scared, I left the rifle near me, just waiting for the werewolf to come back again, but luckily for me, or luckily for the werewolf, this creature didn't show up, because we were armed with rifles, and waiting for the werewolf to come back. As time passed, the day dawned, and I was still very afraid of this werewolf, and afterwards, I still helped my father to fix the chicken coop that the werewolf destroyed. As the hours went by, and when the afternoon came, I went to a bar in my village to drink some beers and see some friends of mine from the neighborhood. However, while I was there drinking with some acquaintances, I noticed that there was a strange man in this place, and he had a bandage on his legs. I learned that this guy was attacked by some dogs, but to my amazement was that this had already happened to this man other times. It was the second time that the dogs had attacked him, but at the time I didn't think anything of it, and ended up telling my acquaintances at the bar that I had almost been attacked by a werewolf at dawn. This conversation spread through the bar. Some laughed at me, and others even believed me. In this bar, strangely enough, I heard people talking about several dogs being attacked by large animals in the night, and this had been going on for at least a month. And after all this talk, the man who had a dog bite wound on his leg was in a scared mood because he surely had heard all this talk about werewolves and dead dogs in our neighborhood, and he left the bar quickly, as if he knew something more about the terror that was going on in our village. As soon as the suspect left the bar, I also left the bar and went back to my farm and spent the night very scared and thinking only about the werewolf and if he would appear again or not. But thank goodness that this beast did not return, and as soon as this weekend passed, I returned to my house that was in the city center, where I lived and worked, and of course, I was worried about my parents, and warned them not to be stupid and not to go out in the yard at night, and do not forget to close all the doors and windows, because this creature could return and attack the house. The fact is that as I was in town, and more quiet, I started thinking about this werewolf, and out of nowhere, something came into my thoughts, that guy, who was injured in the bar, and with bandages on his legs, and that he would have been attacked by dogs, I think, that for me, that man, was a suspect of being the werewolf. But also, I could be wrong, and be just a coincidence. But also, that man injured by dogs, I had never seen him around my neighborhood. After a few weeks, I went back to visit my father on his farm, and he said that this beast never came back, and no one talked about this werewolf business either. Therefore, when I went to the bar to drink with my acquaintances again in the countryside, I learned that the suspicious guy, who was bitten by the dogs, had disappeared from our neighborhood for some time, and nobody had seen him again. Despite all this suspicious man would not return to the village, because the people would catch him and lynch him for killing dogs. The problem with this story is that the dogs on the streets were killed by bites and claws of a large animal, and it was very clear to me that the suspicious man turned werewolf and ended up fighting with the dogs, and so all this tragedy occurred, and when this man turned werewolf, he appeared all bruised. I didn't tell my werewolf story anymore, so that people wouldn't think I was crazy and become a laughingstock, but I know what I saw, and this werewolf beast exists, and it is violent and attacks people. But anyway, do you think that the guy who was bitten by the dogs, he was the werewolf? That's the question. Thank you all for watching my video, and if you like, subscribe to the channel Zone of Fear to receive our new videos every week, and leave your comments, because only then YouTube sees that you like the content, and with that the channel grows. I need 10 comments on this video, and thank you for your help. Channel Fear Zone. Good evening everyone, and before I start the video, I ask you to like and subscribe to the channel. And now, let's go to the story of today, and who sent us this event was Mr. Paulo, who was from the city of Ribeirão das Neves, Brazil, and this happened to him in the year 2004, when he was 42 years old. And it all started like this. I lived in a neighborhood near a rural area of my city, and I knew a family of rich people who lived in the city, but this family had a farm near my region, and they called me, and it was for me to clean their farm, because they were going to spend the weekend there. Well, I always did these jobs for the owners of this place. But it happened that I went to do my day job, and I went to clean the place at night, and this was already around 10 o'clock at night, and so I started to clean the place, collecting the sticks and the leaves that fell on the ground, and also removed the fruits that were falling on the ground, which were spoiled. At that time, in that place, it was very dark, but as soon as I finished cutting the weeds at the entrance to the gate, I finished all the work. Then I got my things that were stored inside the house that I had in this small farm, and then I left the farm to go away, so I walked a little on the dirt road, but soon I saw, about 50 meters ahead, a very large and strange animal. It even looked like a dog, and of course, I stopped and hid behind a tree that was there near the road, and kept looking at that animal, because this beast seemed to be dangerous. But then, I got really scared, because that strange animal stopped walking, and then, it sat and kneeled, and it even seemed to be a person, and it also kept looking around the woods. At that time I got scared, and thinking that it was not possible that an animal could stay in that position. I was very scared that that creature would find me hiding in the woods. With that, I stayed there watching what that creature was going to do, because I was waiting for the moment so that that animal could get distracted and I could try to get out of there without being seen. But while looking at that, suddenly I saw this beast that was half sitting and kneeling on the ground, getting up and stood up like a man, and it was at that time that I realized that that was a werewolf, and his eyes had a scary glow, that would make any brave man be afraid. But what happened next was that this werewolf began to smell and sniff the air, and he seemed to suspect something, and I thought that this werewolf had smelled me, and that creature began to look suspicious in my direction. I was frozen with fear, for I saw this creature crouching, and stood on 4 legs. I was afraid of this werewolf came towards me, but to my luck, that monster disappeared into the woods. However, I thought better, then it got worse, because now I did not know where werewolf could be, but soon I saw the werewolf behind a tree hiding, and that for sure was waiting for me to leave where I was hiding, but the werewolf was 50 meters away from me, so I took advantage and ran away, because the sight of my boss was close. With this, I arrived quickly at the farm and entered the house that was around the place, but then I started to hear a rapid breathing, as if it was of some tired dog, and this sound came from near the house. At this time, the fear that I was increased even more, because, for sure, that monster, he already knew it was around there, and I didn't wait, and grabbed a piece of wooden cable to protect myself. But I could hear the beast's footsteps prowling around, and I turned on the backyard lights, and looked out the window, and saw that the werewolf was confused, and he just ran across the yard and disappeared. Even so, I stayed tuned, because it could come back at any time to give me hell, and that house I was hiding in didn't have any firearms. Anyway, I stayed up all night, but when it got close to 4 o'clock in the morning, suddenly, I started to hear some very strong knocks on the door of the house. Then I thought it was that creature, and that he wanted to get inside the house, and that was desperate, but it didn't take long and I started to hear some strange growls from this monster, and suddenly the creature started to roll on the ground, and made a noise as if he felt a lot of pain. I looked out the window, and I saw this creature walking upright with many difficulties, and he went to the fence, and he managed to disappear into the darkness. As the hours passed, dawn came, and I took courage, for it was about 7 o'clock in the morning, and I left that place, and walked along the dirt roads, and was very afraid of meeting the werewolf again. After walking for a long time, I managed to get to my house in the village. In this whole story, I had one concern, because the owner of the farm would arrive that same day, with his friends and relatives, to spend the weekend at the farm, and I would have to warn him somehow to be careful with that creature that terrified me. So with this problem, I called the owner of the farm around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and he was already with his family and friends around the place, and I told him about a supposed dangerous animal that I saw inside his farm that tried to attack me at dawn, and that he should be careful at night and not let anyone leave the farmhouse after dark. But my boss told me something strange, that when he arrived at the place, a strange man appeared at the farm gate and said that he had left his bag inside the residence that was there at the farm. My boss was angry with this stranger, but went to look for the bag of this man, and indeed he had left his things stored inside the house, and my boss handed over his bag with the documents, but he told the stranger that if he saw him around the place, he would call the police, because he had made an invasion of private property. The owner of the farm asked me if I knew this guy with the bag, and I said that I didn't know who he was, and I couldn't imagine that there was someone sleeping around the farm, because I hadn't been in this farm for more than a month. The fact was that the werewolf appeared around 4 o'clock in the morning, and wanted to break down the door of the house, where I was hiding, and for sure, it was close to the time of the werewolf, and so, he could not enter the residence, because I closed the doors and windows of the farmhouse, and he went to another place, and he left this bag with clothes to dress, this was my conclusion that I had this horror story. However, the days went by, and the owner of the farm said that the creature did not appear on the farm. But otherwise, when I cleaned that place for my boss, it was only during the day, because I would never again clean there at night, because, for sure, I could come across other werewolves. I would not risk it again. Well, folks, that was the haunted story that I lived with this creature called the werewolf. Thanks to everyone who watched the story. If you liked the video, give a like and subscribe to receive our new videos.